love story of betrayal, revelation, and redemption. The accident that broke everything. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital ward buzzed overhead, casting cold white shadows across Aira's bruised face. Every inch of her body screamed in pain. Her left arm was encased in a heavy plaster cast from wrist to shoulder. Her ribs throbbed with each shallow breath, and deep purple bruises patterned her skin like twisted ink art. The violent crash had sent her sedan spinning into a concrete ditch on Highway 47. Metal crumpled like paper, airbags deploying with enough force to leave her chest raw and tender. "Nurse, please, have you seen my husband?" Aira's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper after hours of calling out for him. 3 years of marriage to Axel Sampson, CEO of Sampson Industries, a multi-million-dollar tech conglomerate. And she'd never once doubted that he'd come running if she was hurt. She'd married him to unite their families' businesses, yes, but she'd stayed because she'd fallen hopelessly in love with his quiet strength, his sharp mind, and the rare moments when he'd let his guard down and show her kindness. The nurse, a young woman with kind eyes, shook her head gently. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sampson. Mr. Sampson was here earlier, but he's in Ward 3A with Ms. Vance. He said he'd come by later." Aira's heart sank like a stone. Sierra Vance, Axel's ex-girlfriend, a stunning socialite with cascading blonde hair and eyes the color of honey. She'd made Aira's life a living hell since the day she'd married Axel, spreading rumors, sabotaging her efforts to fit into the Sampson family, and always finding ways to be close to him. 20 minutes later, the ward door burst open with enough force to make the glass rattle. Axel strode in, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people made in a year. His jaw was clenched, so tight she could see the muscles working, his dark eyes burning with fury. Behind him, Sierra leaned on a crutch, her face pale and tear-streaked, wearing a designer hospital gown that looked more like high fashion than medical wear. "How could you do this, Aira?" Axel's voice cut through the quiet room like a blade. "The police report says you swerved directly into Sierra's lane. She could have died. She could have lost the baby." "Baby?" Aira pushed herself up despite the searing pain in her ribs, her eyes wide with confusion. "I would never hurt anyone, Axel. It was an accident. A truck cut me off. I swerved to avoid it and lost control." Sierra stepped forward, pressing a trembling hand to her stomach as fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. "I know you've always hated me, Aira. I know you've resented how close Axel and I are, but please, don't let our baby pay for my mistakes." She looked up at Axel with eyes full of faux tenderness. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks ago. It's yours, Axel, our child. I can't let them grow up without a mother." The words hit Aira like a physical blow, sending her reeling back against the pillows. For 3 years, she dreamed of having Axel's child. She'd even stopped taking her birth control 6 months ago, hoping that one of their rare nights together would result in a baby. She'd imagined telling him over dinner, watching his face light up with joy, finally feeling like she belonged in the Sampson family. "You're lying," Aira whispered, but even she could hear the doubt in her own voice. "Axel, you know me. I would never do something like this. Wouldn't you?" Axel's voice was cold as ice. You've always been desperate to keep me, desperate to be part of this family. Maybe you finally snapped. He pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase and tossed it on her bedside table. Inside is $500 million in bearer bonds, compensation for what you've given up. Take it and tell the police it was your fault. Sierra will be cleared, and you'll get a light sentence with good behavior. Rage boiled up inside Aira, hot, sharp, and consuming. For 3 years, she'd endured her stepmother-in-law's endless demands, waking at 5 a.m. to cook elaborate breakfasts, attending every charity gala, even when she was sick, learning every detail of the Samson business, just to have something to talk about with Axel. She'd smiled through every insult, every snub, every time Sierra had draped herself over Axel at family events, all because she believed love could conquer anything. But now she saw the truth. You gave me $500 million to take the fall for a crime I didn't commit. Aira's voice was low and steady, her eyes blazing with a fire Axel had never seen before. She swung her good arm with all her strength and slapped Sierra hard across the face. The sound echoed through the ward like a gunshot, leaving a bright red handprint on Sierra's pale cheek. I'll trade every penny for that slap, and when I'm done, I want a divorce today. Trembling, she reached for her phone. Its screen cracked, but still functional, and dialed a number she'd kept hidden in her contacts, never once looking away from Axel's shocked face. Father, yes, it's me. Her voice broke, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I've decided to divorce him. I can't do this anymore. She couldn't hear his response. Over the sound of her own sobs, the room began to spin, the edges of her vision turning black as the pain in her heart finally overwhelmed her body. With a soft gasp, she collapsed forward, unconscious. 15 minutes later, a deafening roar tore through the air as a sleek black Airbus Asher 160 helicopter descended from the gray morning sky, its rotors whipping up wind that sent medical charts and loose papers scattering across the pavement. The aircraft was emblazoned with the crest of the Crestwell dynasty, a golden lion holding a diamond, a symbol known to every business leader in the country as representing wealth beyond imagination. The doors swung open, and Julian Crestwell stepped out, tall, distinguished, dressed in a custom-tailored black suit. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his eyes sharp and intelligent, and his presence commanded attention the way a king's would. He was one of the most powerful men in the world, founder of Crestwell Global, a trillion-dollar empire that spanned technology, real estate, energy, and healthcare. Where is my daughter? His voice boomed through the hospital corridor as he strode toward Aira's ward, flanked by 6 massive bodyguards in black suits and a team of lawyers carrying leather briefcases. Axel stood frozen in the doorway as the group approached. Sir, I don't understand. Aira's father is a mechanic from Riverside. I met him at our wedding. Julian stopped, his gaze sweeping over Axel with withering contempt. That was my chauffeur's brother. My daughter has lived under an assumed name for 3 years because she believed love should be earned, not bought. You've done enough damage to her already. He pushed past Axel and entered the ward, his face softening the moment he saw Aira's unconscious form. Gently, he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed no more than a child and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Let's go home, my love. You don't belong here anymore. As his bodyguards cleared the way, Julian carried Aira to the helicopter. Axel stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing. The quiet, dutiful wife he'd taken for granted was being carried away by one of the most powerful men on the planet, and he had no idea who she really was. 1 month later, Aira stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her childhood bedroom, looking out over the sprawling Crestwell estate. 500 acres of manicured gardens, pristine lakes, and guest houses that were larger than most people's homes. She'd spent the past month healing both physically and emotionally. Her arm was still in a cast, but the pain was fading, replaced by a steely determination to take back control of her life. "They think you're weak," Julian said, entering the room with a tray of tea. "They think you'll disappear quietly, but you're my daughter. We don't run from our battles, we end them." Aira turned from the window, her eyes hard with resolve. "I don't want to destroy them, Father. I just want them to see the truth. I want Axel to know that I never wanted his money. I wanted him. Then we'll show them exactly who you are," Julian said, setting down the tray and pulling out a glossy invitation. "The annual Crestwell Gala is in 3 weeks. Every wealthy family in the country is invited, including the Sampsons. It's time the world met the real Aira Crestwell." 2 weeks later, the Sampson family sat around their mahogany dining table, the air thick with tension. Victoria Sampson, Axel's stepmother and the family matriarch, smoothed down her designer dress as she looked at the golden invitation in her hand. "The Crestwell Gala," she murmured, her voice full of awe. "No one from our family has ever been invited. This could be the opportunity we've been waiting for. A partnership with Crestwell Global would make us billionaires overnight." Axel stared at his own invitation, his mind still replaying the day Aira had been taken away. "Why would they invite us?" he asked quietly. "We're nothing compared to the Crestwells. Perhaps they've heard of our success with Sampson Industries," Victoria said dismissively. "Regardless, we'll be there, Sierra. Make sure you look your best. This could be your chance to finally secure your place in this family." Sierra smiled sweetly, placing a hand on her now visible belly. "Of course, Aunt Victoria. I just want what's best for Axel and our baby." Axel looked away, a strange feeling of unease settling in his stomach. Something wasn't right. He'd hired a private investigator to look into the crash, and the preliminary reports suggested Sierra's car had been modified to malfunction at high speeds. But before he could dig deeper, Victoria had shut down his investigation, insisting it was a waste of time. Ballroom night. The Crestwell Mansion's grand ballroom was more magnificent than anything the Sampsons had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers, the size of cars, hung from the ceiling, casting rainbows across marble floors, polished to mirror-like perfection. Gold leaf adorned every surface, and rare flowers from around the world bloomed in massive arrangements that filled the air with sweet fragrance. The country's elite mingled across the room. Billionaires, politicians, royalty, all dressed in couture gowns and custom suits. Axel stood by the bar, a glass of scotch in his hand, scanning the crowd for any sign of Aira. He'd hired the best investigator money could buy, but every lead on her whereabouts had gone cold. He missed her more than he'd ever imagined. Missed her quiet strength, her gentle smile, the way she'd always leave him notes in his lunchbox, even when he ignored her. "She's not coming," Sierra said, sliding up beside him and linking her arm through his. "She knows she can't compete with people like us. Let's just enjoy the party. Think of the opportunities this could bring for our baby. Just then, the music fell silent. Every head turned toward the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom as spotlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the landing. Julian Crestwell stood there, tapping a microphone to test it. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the speakers, rich with power and authority. "Thank you for joining us tonight. For 3 years, my daughter has lived among you under a different name. She did this because she believed that love should be about who you are, not what you have. Tonight, we end that charade and introduce her to the world as she was always meant to be known." The spotlight shifted, and a gasp rippled through the crowd. Aira emerged at the top of the staircase, and Axel's jaw dropped so far he thought it might dislocate. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that flowed like liquid over her curves, embroidered with thousands of tiny diamonds that caught the light like scattered stars. Her long black hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves, adorned with diamond pins shaped like roses, a necklace of sapphires and rubies. The legendary Crestwell heirloom rested against her collarbone, and her amber eyes glowed with a confidence and beauty that took his breath away. She descended the staircase with effortless grace, every step commanding attention. As she reached the bottom, Julian took her hand and raised it high. "Please welcome my only child, Aira Crestwell Sampson," he announced, his voice ringing with pride. "The sole heir to the Crestwell dynasty, with a personal fortune 10 times greater than the entire Sampson empire. She will take over as CEO of Crestwell Global next year and lead our family into a new era of innovation and success." The room erupted in applause, but Axel could only stare. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd dismissed as common, the woman he'd accused of trying to kill someone, was standing before him as one of the most powerful women in the world. Sierra's face drained of color, her hand flying to her stomach as she stumbled back. Victoria stood frozen, her mouth agape, the champagne glass in her hand trembling so hard the liquid sloshed over the rim. "Aira," Axel whispered, pushing through the crowd toward her. "I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?" She turned to face him, her expression calm and distant. "Because I wanted you to love me, Axel. Not my money, not my name, just me. But you never even gave me the chance to show you who I really was." After saying that, Aira quickly vanished into the crowd. The truth comes out. Axel had spent the past month investigating everything: the accident, Sierra's claims, even Aira's background. What he'd discovered had left him sick with remorse. The police report showed that Sierra had been the one to swerve into Aira's lane. She'd been trying to run Aira off the road, hoping to eliminate her once and for all. And when he demanded a paternity test, the results were clear. The baby she was carrying belonged to her secret lover, a junior executive at the Sampson Company, who'd been embezzling funds with the help of Axel's stepmother. Confronted with the evidence, Sierra broke down and confessed everything: how she'd conspired with Axel's stepmother to destroy Aira, how she'd faked the accident, how she'd lied about the pregnancy to trap Axel. Axel's stepmother was arrested for embezzlement and conspiracy. Her face twisted with fury as she realized the woman she'd looked down on was actually far more powerful than her entire family. With the truth finally revealed, Axel knew he had to make things right. even if it was already too late. He found Ira on the balcony of the Crestwell estate, looking out over the gardens as the sun set. "Ira," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry for everything, for not believing you, for letting them hurt you, for not seeing the incredible woman you are." She turned to face him, her expression calm but distant. "Why are you here, Axel? We're getting divorced. The papers are already drawn up." "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," he said, stepping closer. "But I need you to know that I've been a fool. I thought you wanted me for my money, but you were the one who gave up everything to be with me. I've spent 3 years pushing away the only woman who's ever truly loved me, and I'd do anything to have another chance." Ira looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness and strength. "For 3 years, I did everything I could to make you love me. I endured your mother's cruelty, Sierra's lies, your coldness. I thought if I was patient enough, kind enough, you'd see me, but you only saw what you wanted to see." Axel knew he couldn't just ask for her forgiveness. He had to earn it. Over the following months, he worked tirelessly to make amends. He stepped down as CEO of Samson Industries to focus on rebuilding the company's reputation after the embezzlement scandal, and he used his influence to ensure Sierra and his stepmother faced full consequences for their actions. But more than that, he spent every day showing Ira that he'd changed. He attended charity events she supported, learned about her business interests, and made an effort to understand the woman she really was, not just his wife, but a brilliant, compassionate leader who'd inherited her father's talent for business and his heart for helping others. He never pushed her, never demanded anything. He simply stood by her side, supporting her as she took over leadership of the Crestwell empire. Slowly, she began to let him back into her life, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes and the changes he'd made. One evening, he took her to the small garden where they'd shared their first dance as husband and wife, a place she'd kept hidden on the Crestwell estate. He'd had it restored exactly as it had been 3 years ago, filled with her favorite flowers and lit with hundreds of candles. "I know I can't change the past," he said, kneeling before her and pulling out a small velvet box, "but I hope you'll let me be part of your future. I love you, Ira, not because of your wealth or your power, but because you're the most incredible woman I've ever known. You've shown me what real strength and love look like." Inside the box was a ring, not a diamond, but a simple band of black onyx set with a single emerald, matching the gown she'd worn to the gala. Aira looked at him, tears of joy, finally replacing the tears of pain she'd shed for so long. "I've loved you for 3 years, Axel, even when you didn't deserve it, but you've worked hard to make things right, and I see the man you're becoming." She took his hand. "I'll give you a chance, not as the heir to the Blackwood Empire and the CEO of Samson Industries, but as Aira and Axel, 2 people who want to build a life together." A year later, they were married again, this time in a small ceremony in the same garden where Axel had proposed. Their families, what was left of the Sampsons, and the entire Crestwell clan gathered to celebrate, along with friends and colleagues who'd watched their journey from betrayal to redemption. Aira was now CEO of the Crestwell empire, leading the company to new heights while also running a foundation that helped women who'd faced domestic abuse and manipulation. Axel had returned to Samson Industries, rebuilding it into a company known for its integrity and innovation, and he worked closely with Aira on joint ventures that helped communities across the country. As they danced under the stars, Axel pulled her close and whispered in her ear, "I spent 3 years not seeing you. Now I can't imagine my life without you. You're not just my wife. You're my partner, my inspiration, and my whole world." Aira smiled up at him, her eyes shining with love and happiness. "We've been through so much, but I wouldn't change a thing. It took losing everything to realize what's truly important, and that's us."